Christina Pulver here, Director of Forza1 South, and I'm with Director from Forza1 North and former UCI college coach, Aaron Flores. Hi, Aaron.
Hey, Christina, how are you?
Awesome. Yeah. So we thought it would be really beneficial for our college bound athletes to hear answers to some of your recruiting questions directly from a former college coach. So we're going to focus today on really just like some basic questions you have that are sometimes a little bit more on the awkward side.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, because really the more knowledge student athletes have about each step in the process, the better they will be able to navigate its crazy twists and turns.
yeah. I think
Um,
I can bring a little bit of perspective too, just in terms of, I'm not a college coach anymore, and I'm trying to help the kids on this end. And I know you're doing a lot of these calls with college coaches that are they're going so great. They're really cool. Everyone's loving them, but there's still recruiting tools for them, and they still have to be in that recruiting mode. And I can kind of be, maybe a little bit different perspective and kind of get, like we talked about, the little inside scoop, kind of what's happening and maybe what's going through their head at this time and in the recruiting office. So that'll be fun. Excited.
yeah. And as we go, if as people are listening, if you have more questions that you're a little afraid to ask, pop us a text or an email because we're going to be planning on doing a part 2 to this as well. We just want to help you guys and give you as much knowledge as possible. So we're going to go in like a sequence of realistic events where questions might pop up for you. So I guess first off, leading up to a tournament or in between tournaments, you're all sending out emails. Sometimes coaches respond, sometimes coaches don't respond. So I guess the first question is, what does it mean if they don't respond? Are they still going to come watch me play?
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't think what you're sending out one email, you're sending out a bunch of emails to these schools, but what you have to understand is as a player, these coaches are receiving hundreds and hundreds of emails. I know when I was at UC Irvine, it was a very popular school. I mean, when people go through the recruiting process, it's just a school that attracted the attention of a lot of kids. Orange County, the player, you're 2.5, miles from Newport Beach. Your weather's great. It's a great school. It was a UC school, great academics. The amount of emails that would come through just in a day, especially in weeks leading up to tournaments, it was really overwhelming. It was actually unbelievable. And so the fact that they didn't respond maybe to every single email or to that email, it doesn't mean they're not going to come watch you play. But I think still if you're unsure, they don't respond, you still want to make sure you're sending those emails because it shows your interest in them. And I think that's super important. They know that you have a genuine interest in their program, which is equally important. And I think it helps when the school is trying to prioritize their weekend.
Mhm.
I think that's something that the college coaches do when we go into the weekend is, we have a spreadsheet, we're planning it out. We're picking, okay, these coaches are the coaches that are out recruiting. This is our priority. This is where we need to spend time day one. These are kids, maybe depending on your age or where you're at in the process, maybe we're just going to go watch your warm-ups. I mean, that might be all we're going to go watch, but we'll get to see a little bit of something. So I think it's definitely important to know that, yeah, they may still stop by or they may not. Plans change throughout the course of the weekend, but at least you're on that list and you're on that, in that range of kids that they need to go within the next couple weekends or whatnot. But yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if they don't respond to everyone, or you might just get a general response. I think that's something that I utilized was just a general response. Here's an email. I can send it out to a bunch of people, and yeah, that happens. I mean, hey, we're looking forward to watching you play, and at the end of the day, it happens or it doesn't, but it doesn't mean they're not going to if they don't respond.
Exactly. So you're getting 50, sometimes up to 100 emails a day, especially leading up to these big tournaments. You might quickly go through and you have your university athlete out and you're just quickly identify, or star. And then you print your spreadsheet. And like you said, depending on if the game goes long or if the court's too far away, you may or may not get there for much. So then the next question is, what happens when you go and the person you're coming to watch is sitting on the bench? Are you going to go back?
I think, well, two things. One, is that player high on my priority list of players that I need to watch? Is it a high priority position? Is that someone that I've already evaluated before? That's the first thing. If it is, then I am going to stay for a little bit, because equally as important at that point, if I know they're good enough for me to come watch, or I know they meet the criteria for me to come watch, then how they react and what they do while on the bench is very important if I'm in that stage of recruiting them. So I do want to see how they're going to respond and how they're going to act. And I like to do that from a distance sometimes. If I know that a player that I'm recruiting is not currently in the game, I don't want to watch that player on the court that they're on. I want to watch that player from 2 courts over, 3 courts over, because it's very easy for a player to notice and see my shirt walking up and then all of a sudden start cheering for their team. And maybe they weren't doing that before. So I really like to identify that stuff from a distance. I think that's something that happens a lot with college coaches, and players need to be aware of that. Like, they're not always going to be watching. They're not only watching you when they're standing right next to you, that is a tactic, and it is a strategy that we use to really we want to make sure we're getting the real picture. Um, the other thing with that would be why I wouldn't come back is, this happens quite a bit, is if the player isn't what they said they were. Maybe I'm going to watch a 6 foot. I'm 6 foot tall. I'm not very tall like a lot of these college coaches, but I think it helped me at being 6 foot tall, because I got a good gauge if a player was or wasn't my height. You know what I mean? So if they, I'm 6'1", and okay, that's a lot of, that happens in the video or happens in the email. I walk up and they're 5'8". Well, they might not fit the needs of what my university needed. That might be fine for another school. So yeah, I mean, there's situations where I don't, or I just don't come back right away. I have a lot of kids to get through. If I'm in an evaluation stage, or maybe watching a 15s, I'm watching 15s, I'm watching 14s. I've got a lot of time to come back to them. So I may not come back right away. I have got a lot of players that I have to kind of go through, and I may have to move on at that point to another court. But it doesn't by any means mean that you're off the list or off the board. I think unless you're doing something that looks like you're not a great teammate or not a great person, that would be the only thing that I think would just eliminate your chances at that point.
Yeah. Or maybe, I guess the other scenario is as well, maybe on a given team, you have 2 or 3 recruits you're watching, and you might be coming specifically to watch a setter. So the other player that's also on your list is on the bench, but it doesn't even really matter because you're focusing on someone completely different during that game. So, right?
That's absolutely. That's very common as well, especially when you're on good team. Good teams have a lot of players that are recruitable. And it could help, it helps a lot to have that. It's why it's important to play for good clubs with good coaches, and, because you're just more chances for exposure for sure.
Or maybe on the other hand, you could be watching the other team that your team is playing and not even focusing on, on the recruit that they stress.
Yeah. I mean, you find kids that way all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
mean, that's how when I saw McKenna Miller for the first time when I was at UC Irvine. I recruited McKenna Miller, and to be honest, I didn't even know who she was. The first time I watched her, I was watching someone on the other team she was playing. And then I noticed her, and I was like, wow, this kid's pretty good. This kid's going to be really good. She was only like 5'9", I remember at the time, but she ended up growing. I was like, but that was the first time I ever saw her. I actually wasn't watching her team. And that happens all the time.
So then let's talk about what if they are playing, and let's go with a couple different scenarios. Early on in the recruiting process, oh my gosh, this coach finally comes to watch me play, and I have a horrible game, or I think I have a horrible game. What are you actually watching with the play? Are you watching that the ball keeps, getting blocked, hitting out? What are you looking at?
Yeah, I don't really care, especially when they're younger. I think when you're talking about even junior, juniors, sophomores, freshmen, recruiting those ages, I don't really care if they have a great game or not. And like I said, I don't care as a college coach. I don't care if your team wins. I honestly couldn't tell you if your team's winning or losing, because I'm probably not staying for the whole match anyways. But more importantly, we're really watching 2 things: your physical attributes, how you present your platform, how the confidence level you have with your platform passing, your jumping ability, your arm. I think if you're a hitter, that's what I'm looking for. How high are you? How hard are you? Like how hard do you hit? How high do you play? Not really how tall you are, but how high, how hard. And that's the big thing. I have to be able to identify that. And if you hit a lot of balls out, you hit a lot of balls out. I mean, that's teachable.
Mhm.
making hitting errors. Now, what I would say is if you had a bad game, how you respond to that
Mhm.
is more important than actually how you play.
Mhm.
Because I think I used to love watching players that made errors and then they would bounce back. I want to see what they do next because that's a better indicator of what they're going to be. That's who they are. And that's a better indicator of how they're going to be able to impact my program later.
Mhm.
Is wow, this player is able to bounce back, or maybe I had a bad game at 8 a.m. and I come back later in the day and they're tearing it up. Okay, well she didn't let that affect her entire day.
Yeah.
Those are the things that we want to know as a college coach, outside of just the physical attributes, which are very very important, but how you respond, your toughness, how you engage with your teammates, how you engage with your coach through that, how you take coaching when you're struggling. I mean, those are the things that are important. So for me, I enjoyed I enjoyed watching players play that because I got to learn more about them, and more useful information in the recruiting process. So I think it's good. It's important that happens.
Yeah, and also, hey, how about when they're not getting set,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah,
Are you still genuinely excited for your teammates?
yeah.
You're not getting the ball, or what players have to remember is, and this is hard. I know, coaching these teams, but a coach may be there to watch you, and you're you're a good player, and you're going to play, maybe you're Division 2 or Division 3 level player, and you're awesome, and you got a Pac-12 recruit on the outside on your team, you know, and maybe your team's trying to win. Your team's trying to win, so maybe in those moments that you don't get the ball.
Mhm.
But more important to me is not do you get the ball, is are you prioritizing winning?
Yeah.
Right? If you're prioritizing winning, then you want the ball. I did a film session the other night, and we were watching Iganu, and she's the opposite for Italy. And the match got to 14-10 in the fifth set. Her team was losing. They ended up winning 23-21, and she got every single set. Now, she's on a team with Kim Hill. She's on a team with Melena Ray. She's on a team with all these professional players, and she still gets every ball. Her teammates are good players, but they just wanted to win. And
Yeah.
I think that's more important, is you want to recruit winners.
Mhm.
You want to recruit players that prioritize winning. Because at the end of the day, as a college coach, if you don't win, you're not a college coach anymore.
Exactly.
You know?
So, switching gears a little bit, but still at a tournament, how much do you pay attention to the interaction with the players and their parents, or just even to their parents when you're
Yeah,
recruiting?
I think there's two ways of looking at it. One, when the player gets to college, the parents aren't around. You could
Mhm.
say that, but their interaction with the parents tells me a lot of their maturity level.
Right.
One, I think a player that owns their volleyball process, a player that has ownership for their career, and a player that does that is the player that is going to be successful in the long run.
Mhm.
You know, the player whose parent emails for them, or the player whose parent is making phone calls for them, or that's the same player that's looking to their parent to the sideline during a game. You know what I mean? So I think, and that player is I believe, more likely to struggle early on in college.
Hmm.
I think it takes time for them to get that independence and to be able to deal with things on their own. So yeah, I mean, if a player is constantly seeking out their parents,
Yeah.
that's one thing. And then there's there's parents that are also super involved on the sidelines or trying to get their kids, and the kids want nothing to do with it. I mean, that's good. I think that's good if they're laser focused on what they want to do and their team and competing. That also gives me some good insight as well. And then there's some coaches that maybe just don't care about that stuff. I think there is something to it, but at the end of the day, you just got to play, and really just kind of watch the player, how they play, and you
Yeah.
know that the player you're recruiting hopefully is going to be a lot more mature player when they get to you. You know.
Sure. So, how many times do you feel like you need to watch a player play before you can have a clear evaluation?
Well, I think you can have a clear evaluation watching a player play immediately in 5 seconds. Certain players, and that's either the top end or the bottom end. It's
Mhm.
very easy to figure out. I mean, it's very easy to see the kid that touches 10-5 and has a rocket arm and say they're good enough. It's very easy to see the kid that is that on the other end of the spectrum and say they're not good
Yeah.
enough. Everyone else, it takes some time. I think a lot of college staffs, and I know the college staff that I worked on, we wanted every coach to get an evaluation before we really made a decision on a player,
Mhm.
a live in-person evaluation. And sometimes that can happen. Sometimes it can't, depending on the timeline of when you identify the kid. But I think that's important.
Mhm.
I worked with Paula at UCI, and Paula had a very specific eye and a very specific types of players that she liked. And so for me, it was important to also take into consideration as her employee, like, hey, this is what Paula likes. I had my preferences on what I like, but hey, this is the type of player that Paula's really going to like too. So, and then hey, Paula, you need to come watch this player because I want you to we need to get an evaluation from you on that as well. So I think you can tell right away if they're good enough.
Yeah.
It's the process that has to happen in order to figure out if they're a player you want to offer, or you really want to be a part of your program. I want to get them on a visit. You want to get them on campus. Get to know them as much as you can.
Mhm. And your job is really not, are they good enough today, but will they be good enough in 2 years, 3 years, 4 years? How
Yep.
much higher, how much better are they going to actually get? The term, how high is their ceiling? That's obviously discussed. And that's a really difficult challenge. And thank God in a lot of ways that the recruiting process, moved and changed this last season. So it really allows college coaches to make better decisions.
It allows them to make better decisions, I think, which it allows the players to make better decisions, which is hopefully going to help the amount of kids that are transferring.
Yeah.
On our end as a club directors and recruiting, we don't want our kids transferring. We want our kids making great decisions and being happy with their decisions and staying with that. That's something we really place high value on. But at the end of the day, we're going to help them whatever happens, and to get them in a position that helps them. It's best for them.
And
But yeah, I think that's going to help the whole transfer process, kids and coaches making better decisions for sure.
Mhm.
But yeah, kids do late bloom.
Yeah.
We have a player at Forza1 North who just committed to Santa Clara, which we're really excited for her. But last year, her sophomore year was her first year of club volleyball.
Wow.
Our 18s team last year at North, both of our middles who are playing Division I volleyball, both of them, their first year of club with us was their sophomore year. So, kids pick up the game late. That stuff happens. And then there's the other end where, like you said, with ceilings, kids reach their ceiling early.
Yeah.
And that's hard. That's hard because, especially with girls, I think girls have a tendency to reach an earlier ceiling than maybe boys, just because boys develop later.
Mhm. Yeah.
They're more likely to grow later in high school and stuff like that. So I think it kind of depends. But yeah, it's super important that you get a good evaluation on the kid. Look, how big are the parents? If I'm
Yeah.
recruiting a freshman and the kid's 6 foot tall and both the parents are shorter than the kid, that's a big indicator. So
So
you know,
let's talk about some of the responses players or directors get after tournaments and what some of the responses really mean. So
yeah.
one response might mean after the tournament, they say to the director, "Yeah, they're on my radar. They're on my radar." What does that mean?
Well, I think all that means is they're just going to continue to evaluate. They want to see more.
Mhm.
Maybe they didn't get maybe they're in the initial phase of evaluation where they're just getting to, hey, I'm going to stop by this court and see if this kid is worth spending more time on.
Mhm.
When I would go to a tournament, a lot of kids are on your radar on day one, and you're roaming around and you're getting, okay, boom. And honestly, what I was doing, if I'm getting an initial evaluation on a kid, it's usually, do I need to come back?
Yeah.
And then I can get more evaluation. But there's so many kids I got to get through. So radar just might mean, hey, we saw them, um, and we want to watch them some more.
Yeah.
We want to see more. That's really it.
Yeah, and I think that another answer that's similar, probably going to get a similar answer from you, is a lot of our players say, "Okay, well, they say they want to keep watching me and see how I develop."
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's big. My thing was, I always tell my players this, and I always did this. Whether I watch you every other month or whether I watch you every week or every time I go and watch you, though, I want you to be better.
Mhm.
even if it's 1%, like I want to make sure that the player is getting better every time. So yeah, I want to continue to watch. I want to continue to see if the player is improving. You know, if I watch a player in February and I watch a player in April, they're the same player, that's a red flag. You know, that means in the time where they're supposed to be developing the most as an athlete, they're not getting better.
Mhm.
You know, now as a college coach, I also am going to ask myself why. You know, are they playing at a club that doesn't develop players? That's something that happens, you know? So then you also have to say, well, wait a second, maybe we're going to see what happens, or maybe I'm going to see what this player does in the off season. I know a lot of 99% of college coaches aren't going to get involved with that process. But if it's a player that I truly believed in, I mean, I said it, you probably need to think about playing somewhere else next year so you can develop, because I think you have a lot of potential, you know? I was, you know me, I was okay saying it. And I know there's other coaches out there that will say it. We got a player this year at our club that is with us because a coach said it,
Yeah, I love it.
you know, and hey, you know, that coach knows, very experienced, and hey, we like you, we like everything about you. You have a
Yeah,
lot of potential, but they can't coach you right now.
yeah, yeah.
So the only people that can coach you are us. And so we need to put you in an environment where you can grow, because you can grow.
Yeah, no, exactly. And some players I think they get negatively, oh, I didn't show them enough, or I guess that may be a reality too. Maybe the coach saw them, but unless they get a lot faster, a lot higher, then they're definitely not on the list. But at least it's hope they didn't cross them off the list, right?
Yeah. No,
Then so then when a coach says to us or to a player, "You're on my board,"
yeah.
why don't you talk a little bit about the behind the scenes when the coaches go back together, collaborate, talk, have the boards up on the wall, moving up boards, moving down boards. Give us the inside
The
scoop.
board. Yeah, the board is great. I mean, and the board, you know, your recruiting board, and what it is just, you know, some coaches have probably more intricate boards than others based on you know, the level of that they're at, or how many kids they're recruiting. You know, if you're a school that's only recruiting maybe in state, your board might be smaller. But you know, we put players up on the board, and we would sort it by our class, you know, so this 2020, 2021, 2022, each section. We would also put, this is also probably one of the most important things we haven't touched on in recruiting that's on the board. We want to make sure this information is on the board as well, or maybe it's not publicly on the board, but what my scholarship availability is in that class.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because my dream school is USC, and I'm a setter, and they may not be recruiting your position in the class, you know? So we have to know that on the board of, hey, what do I have available here? You know, what does my roster look like? What do I need in this class? And then from there, I start to really rank my board. You know, we do tiers. I would do tiers of my, you know, basically a first tier and a second tier of the board. And the first tier of kids are kids you know, maybe it's your top 3 or your top 5, depending on position, you know. And then you have your second tier of kids, and you're continuing to evaluate those kids and see if those kids can at some point reach that top tier. Um, and what you're doing is you're just constantly evaluating those players and seeing if they're falling or moving, or maybe a player on your board commits elsewhere. Well, then they're going to come off the board, and another player might move into that tier, or however that the college decides to organize their board.
Sure.
You know?
Or you have a really good phone call with a recruit. You have 2 recruits are kind of both in that 4th place spot, and you have a really good
Yeah,
phone call. That player might move into the solid 4th place spot based on the phone call, right?
absolutely.
Um,
Yeah, if you have 2 players that are really similar in a lot of ways, those are the types of things that are going to separate. The one thing that I think is big too is like we talked about before, is you're not only being recruited by the school, um, you know, you're recruiting them in a sense. And so if I have a player, you know, that's number 3 and number 4, and they're both very, very similar. The player that is showing that they have high interest level in us is huge, because you want players that want to play for you. You want people that are really, really interested in your school, rather than the kid you're fishing, and you're really trying to get them to be involved, or be, you know, really trying to get them to really like your school. I mean, there is a huge advantage to showing that.
yeah,
And that's a way, especially when it comes down to getting an offer.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? We have that conversation with players all the time. Okay, I'm in the top 3, you know? Why haven't I gotten an offer yet?
Hmm.
Well, there's a lot of coaches that'll flat out tell you, we're not going to offer a kid unless we know they're going to say yes.
Right.
And I don't think players really think about that. We want to offer kids that we know are going to say yes.
Hmm. Yeah. No,
And I think that's important.
yeah, and going back to, so once you get on the board, I think you bring up a really good point about recruiting the college. In a lot of my conversations this week, I was saying, how often do you want them to contact you? Recruits, once if they're really excited about a school, they should be emailing and contacting the coach at a minimum of every 2 weeks.
Yeah,
And right now, okay, well, I have nothing to send him. Oh, yes, you do. You know what? Send him a funny TikTok. Send him you doing your setting in the backyard. I think
yeah,
it's so important when you're recruiting the school. You want them to get to know you, not just for the volleyball. And there are so many ways to do that right now. Follow them on social media, like a lot of their posts, comment on their posts, really get to know them, show your interest through social media as well. And we can talk more about that. But too, constant communication, creative constant communication. You like back to the scenario, you might be number 4, but right now in this off period, you're the one that's emailing every other week with all these creative ideas. And you just moved to a solid number 3 because you showed initiative
yep.
and, genuine interest in that school. And you showed a lot of, authenticity right now in this off period, right?
Absolutely. I think that's huge. And right now, yeah, you're getting this. They're bored.
Yeah.
You know how many college coaches I've had call me and say, "Aaron, I'm bored."
Right.
We're bored. Like there's only so much and so they want to hear from you. They want to know what you're doing. They want to know how you're doing. They want to see who's motivated during this time. Who's gonna adapt
Yeah.
in adversity. And do those things. The other thing I would say with that, Christina, is email response time. I
Yep.
think is big. Not only should you be reaching out, but if you get an email, I think an important thing is just how long does it take you to respond?
Right. Absolutely.
How long does it take you to open the email? From our end, like we had a software that we used, and we could tell how long it took before the player opened the email, or how long they spent looking at the email. Did they just open it and close it? Like it tells you that, and so I think that's big. Like email response time. You get an email, you can make sure you're responding, and it's not sitting there for a week and a half or 2 weeks. Because that gauges interest or just your commitment to the process.
Yeah.
Check your emails every single day.
Yeah.
I agree with you. Like every other week or every week, send an update just how you're doing. It doesn't even have to be a video. I don't have a new video. You don't need a new video. They want to get to know you.
Yeah. And until the coach either tells you or I or them directly that they're just not interested or they no longer have a need, until the coach cuts the ties, these players with their favorite schools need to be persistent because guess what? All of a sudden, they're going to have an injury or a transfer. And guess what? They're going to remember you and go all the way back down to those emails. There she is. Now I'm going to respond. Or
Yeah.
maybe they're just, like you said, they're keeping track of how often this recruit's responding. So I always tell my players, keep in touch with the schools that you still are very interested in because you never know when all of a sudden they are going to have a need for your
Yes.
school. Or maybe, maybe they're just not responding because you're too young. And I think players need to remember that.
Yeah.
But keep persistent. It's very easy, I think, for players to just keep them on their rotating list, their top 20 schools or whatever, wherever it could, depending on where they're at on their recruiting process.
Oh yeah, yeah, definitely. Like you said, that especially now, just how often things are changing, and that's super important to make sure that you've demonstrated that interest and you're staying on top of it 100%. Yeah.
So let's talk about camps in a given summer. In a typical summer, I mean, how important is it to attend camp at your top schools? And then how do you prioritize which camp? If the school years you're going to someone's camp and you don't come to theirs, is that telling the coach you're not interested? Talk about that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, now with the new recruiting rules that we have in place, camps have become even more important, and clinics and those types of things. This year it's unfortunate we didn't get those spring, those June clinics that were super important. But camps now are more important than ever because, especially if you are a sophomore a freshman, a sophomore, or even a junior, but it's their chance to get to know you. It's your chance to work one-on-one or get to work with the staff and see the campus and talk to the coach on their campus. So camps are more important than ever now. And I think it's super important. The hard part is, like you said, is prioritizing them because they are costly. They can be costly, especially if they're not something that you can drive to in your backyard, with camps. And I would say the big thing is, and there are a lot of schools that will say, we're going to offer at camp. You're in our top 3. We're going to evaluate all 3 of our top recruits at camp, and we're going to make an offer at camp. Well, if that's a school you want to go to, you better be at camp.
Yeah.
I would say, especially for liberos, camp is everything. That position now is being recruited so much at camp because it's just so easy to evaluate them when they're all together. And it's a very hard position to evaluate when they're not together. But prioritizing them based on, one, the school, where do you stand in the recruiting process with them? 2, what can you financially as a family, do? Like, hey, I got to prioritize these schools because I could afford to go here. Okay. But I would highly recommend not going to camp if a school's not recruiting you.
Yeah.
And I think that's a lot of schools are gonna be like, why do you guys say that? But I always tell the schools that, you get a lot of camp stuff. And, what I hate is when my player comes back and says, well, I went to camp and I was just on this court with like 3 of their players and I never even once, well, they're not recruiting you. That's why, camp. And there's the inside scoop we're talking about. Camp is one of the biggest fundraisers for our programs at the college level that we had. Camp was a big part of that. So parents and families and kids need to understand that. And I think they do. That is a big thing, but it also is one of the biggest recruiting tools.
Yeah.
It's just gauging where you fall in that. And, if you're unsure as a player, that's where you and I, Christina, come into play. And we could make a phone call and say, hey, we're trying to prioritize these camps for this player is this going to be worth her time? I'll have that conversation and then I could say, hey, well, we really like her, but she's really kind of outside. Okay, well then we can prioritize another camp, and that's okay.
Exactly.
Or leave that up to the player and say, hey, this is where you stand. You want to go there and see what you can do. But maybe it's a player we know is just electric with their personality, and they have these other intangible qualities that you just can't see unless you get them in front of their face. We had players like that in the past. Remember Haley DeSales, Terry's daughter, was that way. Haley, she was one of the players that I've coached over the years where she only touched 9'5". But I had no problem sending her to a top level program camp or a clinic or something because I knew within 10 minutes they were going to see what made her special.
Yeah.
And sure enough, she would.
And one other thing I think can be seen at camp for a lot of these college coaches is how do they interact with their current players? The college coaches will specifically assign current players. Okay, I want you guys to really try and get to know this player. How do they interact? What are they doing on the breaks? What are they doing? Are they going to stay later for just the open gym scrimmage? See how they, it is a constant evaluation if you're one of their top kids they're thinking about offering.
Yeah, definitely. And I think as a college coach, you're really trying to be strategic with which players you're putting certain recruits with. You want to put put them with players that are going to give you that good feedback or that are going to get some information out of, what their work ethic is like, how they interact out in the dorms during camp. If it's an overnight camp or I don't know if you want to keep this in or edit it out. But, if I think the kid is a little crazy and it might be a party issue, I'm going to put him with a partier. I'm not going to put him with a good kid. I'll put him with a partier and see what they do, and see how they handle it, and try to get a gauge of what their level of discipline is in those types of things. What is their intent? Why are they here? Is this a vacation for them or are they here to work?
Yeah.
Definitely the players are a good gauge of that.
I
If
think
you
the
trust
only
your players.
oh, sorry, go ahead. What'd you say?
As a college coach, if you trust your players.
Yeah, yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I think that's important, as a college coach, you know which players you need to get that information from.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I think the only time I ever recommend a player going to a camp that, that maybe they don't know if the coach wants them or interested in them, and, same with us, is when they're really young, seventh, eighth graders. I love to see if girls
Absolutely.
go to camps, even the 1 day clinics that they're offering, for
Yeah.
a few reasons. Get them, I want them to be on as many college campuses as possible at a younger age so they can start getting a feel for what they like. What is going to be a good fit? Is it a smaller school? Is it a larger school? Is it a city school? Is it a rural school? So that would be one. Number two is I think it's interesting to see the style of coaching that different players maybe do well in and don't do well in. And so just really helping them create a perspective of the different colleges and the different offerings. Also, some of these some college camps you go to, you can really learn a lot. Other
Yeah.
college camps you go to, it's a cattle call.
Yeah.
I sent my daughter to a really large state school college camp when she was in sixth grade. Not because, I wanted her, she was interested in the school, but because she was able to spend the night in the dorms. She was able, there was going to be 500 kids there. I wanted her to see the other level of players that were out there as
Yeah.
well. Like, let's start looking at what your competition is going to be. So more of just like that larger perspective. So it can provide a good overall college perspective.
Absolutely. It's yeah, perfect. You're number 100% right on there with the younger kids, those seventh and eighth grade parents. And we get a lot of recruiting questions on our end of the club. Of what should we be doing right now? Well, getting better at volleyball, letting your kid focus on volleyball. But that's a great opportunity during the summer of something you can do just to open their eyes to what's out there, so that when the process starts to ramp up and they start to get into it, they have an idea of what that is. It's obviously easier for the younger siblings that had older, siblings go through the process because they get to see a lot of those campuses and stuff already. But yeah, the experience of it, and there are college camps that will teach you a lot, and there are some that won't, you
Yeah,
know.
I think players should ask you and I, like, what are the college camps that you would recommend where I could learn more on setting or whatever it is.
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's talk about the importance of academics in recruiting. At what point do the college coaches ask for GPA? And I don't know if players really know how important that overall team GPA is to a college.
Yeah, that was really big for us, at UCI, being a UC school and being a high academic school. We recruited good students. We tried to recruit good students because good students were disciplined and good students were learners and good students will improve in college. You know what I mean? I think that's a big thing from a performance standpoint of volleyball is you're gonna the better the student is and the more interested the student is in learning, that's going to extend onto the volleyball court as well. But from an institution, from our standpoint, being getting players on the dean's list or being an all American, that's huge. It's huge for the university. It's huge for the school. It's huge for the program, and it's a huge recruiting tool. Because at the end of the day, the more academic All-Americans you produce or the higher team GPA you have. I mean, as a mom of the daughters that are good students, you want your daughter going to a school and being around a coaching staff and being around people that place high value on their education.
Absolutely.
So I think if you do that as a college coach and your program maintains that, you're going to continue to recruit high level kids. And we're talking about high level. We're just not talking about how high they jump. We're talking about the person, high level students, high level, highly motivated kids, great learners. And so that was really, really big. And then when you get there, the last thing you want is a player missing practice time or missing things or can't travel because they're academically, incapable of staying on the team. That's a huge, huge thing. And that's going to really affect your team and affect your team's performance if a player can't keep up with their academics.
Yeah. And, at the D2 level, AI level, D3 level, obviously academics become a very big piece because it directly ties to the amount of money you're going to get as an athlete for that college. So
Yeah.
and we're talking a difference between a 3.4 and a 3.8 might mean $8,000.
Yep.
And so, once again, back on the board, if you're number 4 and you have a 3.8 and the other one has 3.4, you're jumping up. So I think recruits really need to make sure they understand the importance of that GPA. And of course, with D3s, there's no athletic money, and so it's
Yeah.
purely based on really your academics.
Yeah, with D3s, too, Kurt can tell you a lot about this, in that, but a lot of the best Division 3 programs in the country are high academic schools.
Yep.
So if you're a Division 3 player, you're interested in playing Division 3, and you want to play on a top level Division 3, well, you have to be really smart as well. Kurt has one of the best Division 3 programs in the country, and it doesn't matter how bad you want to play for them. If you can't get in, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So I
They
think
will
that's
not
super important.
officially sign you, most of them, until you get accepted by the academic institution. There's some leeway. And I'm actually talking with Kurt later today. He can address this more, but there is some a little bit. Yeah. So I guess to answer the question, academics are a huge, huge piece of it.
Huge.
So let's talk about once you've asked the question, am I a top player? I think some college coaches will say, yes, you are in my top 3. Some will say you are in my top 10. Once you get to then the top 3, and I'm sure it depends on the program, but talk about how long does it then take the college coach to actually make the offer? And when they make the offer, how much time do recruits have to answer?
Yeah, I think a lot of it depends on the position, depends on the scholarship situation, the class. For instance, if let's say I'm in the top 3 and I'm an outside hitter, and the school is looking for 2 outside hitters in that class, well, they might make 2 offers, which is right there, right then and there. And so, in terms of timelines, I think that's dependent on each situation is gonna be different depending on the school, or depending on kind of how many scholarships they have available, or how big of a priority that is. When I was at UCI, our philosophy was we're going to recruit kids, and most schools just said we're going to recruit kids that are going to make us better. We're not recruiting kids that aren't better than the players that we have. We have to recruit kids to win our conference, and to win our conference, we had to beat Hawaii or Long Beach State or Cal Poly. At the time, it was more Long Beach State and Hawaii. Now in the Big West, Cal Poly is a very, very good program. They weren't as strong then, but they're very strong now. So for us, it was, we had to gauge the situation and where that player was in the recruiting process as well, and how much pressure we could put on them. Do we put a strict timeline on a player and lose that player? But if we draw it out and give them a lot of time, it could really hurt us in the long run. Let's say we have a top 3 and we offer 2 of those players, and we have 2 scholarships in that class, and we give them all the time in the world. And it takes 2 months for those players to decide. Okay. And in the meantime, number 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 all commit to other schools.
Uh-huh.
And now 1 commits to UCLA, and 2 commits to Long Beach State. And now all of a sudden, the next player on my board is number 8. Now I'm in trouble. And I think so that's where the timeline comes into play. Is you have to be able to understand, like, as a coach, as a college coach, I can't miss out on some of these other players, because if I let it go, everyone's in the recruiting process with a lot of people.
Yeah.
And that's where, as an athlete, I always tell my players as well, on a club level, you have to understand that, hey, they need to make these decisions because they have a lot of other players waiting on what that is. We didn't offer at UCI more scholarships than we had available, but schools will do that. Schools will probably be not like that. We say this, but it's true. I know a lot of schools and a lot of college coaches that may have 1 scholarship available will offer 4 kids.
I know.
And so, with that being said, you don't know that necessarily, and because they don't want to miss out on.
Yeah.
And that's a way of preventing sometimes that situation from happening. So timelines could be really quick. I've heard stories of major high-level Big Ten programs saying, here's an offer at camp, and if you walk out of my office, it's gone.
Yeah.
But those schools are at a level, they're at a level and they're recruiting such a small crop of kids. They're at a level where they can do that, you know? So that, but that's very rare.
Mm.
Um, and usually it's not going to happen, to the average kid. So
I think overall, my biggest thing is I really want players to feel like they're in the driver's seat. They are in the driver's seat. And I want them to feel like at the end of the day, they're going to have a lot of different options to choose from and really try their hardest to understand the values of the program and of the coach. And when they find that fit,
yeah,
volleyball program specifically, I think they know. But it can't be rushed. And so I think it's really important for the recruit to do their own homework. And that may mean asking the coach if you can have the cell phone number of one of the players to just call and pick their brain. Talk to alumni. I think it's really important for players to look at the transfer rate of the
yeah,
college. Why, and then question. Maybe there was a very specific reason why there were several transfers that year. Maybe they each, in fact, maybe a college coach had 5 players transfer over the last 2 years, but they were all like, a tragedy in the family. A
yep.
military move and they want to be closer to home. Like who knows what the situation. So I think it's very important for players to feel like they can ask the difficult questions. And if they're really struggling with that, have you and I ask those questions. But there shouldn't be unknowns for them, and the earlier they can find out those answers, the better.
They need to be very, very thorough with the questions that they ask. And like we were saying before, you're recruiting them in a sense. And that's the mindset that you have to go into. Like you need to know
Mhm.
all of those, cover all your bases and ask the tough questions and really get as much information as you can about the stuff you can't just look on their website and find. That's the stuff you gotta eat. Those are the questions you have to answer for
Yeah.
sure.
I think one of the parts that's the hardest for recruits of all different levels is there's a couple things. I'm on a twos team and I'm watching all the ones players, get recruited. I'm on that ones team and I'm maybe the only one not getting a bunch of responses after a big tournament. I think it's really important for recruits to understand that there is a college out there for everyone and for every level, right? So I don't know what kind of advice you would like to give maybe to that. Let's talk about, the kid on the UA team that is maybe not getting as recruited as many of the others. What are some positive things we can say to them?
Yeah, remember everyone's process is their own process. So just because this girl over here is being recruited, that doesn't mean that you're not being recruited. I mean, everyone's process is individual to themselves, and everyone's timeline is individual to themselves. Some of it is positionally, or like kind of what position you're in. I always find with the younger players, well, the middle, the tall, goofy middle is getting recruited by everybody, but she never gets set. She just, a lot of it is numbers too. There's just not that many kids out there that can do this. Where you're this type of player, you're a dime a dozen. So I think understanding that your process is your process. What team you're on really doesn't matter. Um, and I'll say because that's just about the team that you're on is a fit that you had to find in the tryout process of club that allows you to be the best player and you to develop the best rate that you can. I think that's what I love about our club is our players on our twos teams are recruited, all recruited. And they might be more recruited than a player on a UA team just simply because they're they're growing. They're in a position where they can grow and they can do this where they can really showcase a little bit more. So yeah, definitely that doesn't have any bearing on anything. Kurt will tell you the same thing. At his school, some of the best players that he gets are on twos teams.
Right.
And
And let's face it,
yeah, go ahead.
unless you're that top 5% where you just you're touching over 10 foot as a sophomore and you got your coaches lined up just because they see the other coaches in their conference lining up, so they're going to come line up, right? Coaches don't just magically appear on courts. They're there because primarily, mostly, someone invited them to their court and it was the player. And so I think it's really important for players to understand, like it is a lot of work. Dedicate 2 hours every Sunday to just researching schools and inviting schools to come watch you. And then, like you said, once they come watch you, you got to every single week or every 2 weeks at a minimum be interacting with them in some sort of a way. But what I don't want players to be intimidated by that, though. It gets really fun and kind of addicting. Even if you're not hearing back, own your process, and everyone's process is absolutely their own process and very different. And we have to be very careful not to put too much pressure on ourselves and in our timelines, because like you said, especially positionally, I think some of the liberos, for example, they could be one of the best liberos in the country, and we've seen this at Forza, and they're not going to get offered until their senior year.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's okay.
That's
Be
okay.
patient, right?
Yeah, definitely. I think that's perfectly okay. I think that everyone develops at different rates, especially with the libero position. You know what I mean? I think the libero position is something that is just a unique. It's just a unique beast in that way, and sometimes it's sometimes with money, when you're talking about money with liberos, that's a unique thing. Is sometimes there's more money available if you wait till your senior year than there is if you go through the process early.
True.
Because what ends up happening is schools have these little, a kid transfers or someone gets hurt and they have a little pocket of, hey, I got an open year of money, or I got an open 2 years of money, and now I can use it on a libero if I want. Where when you were a sophomore or junior recruiting you, they weren't planning on using any money on a libero. I think so. Sometimes that, and what it does is it allows you to really make great decisions and
Mhm.
and do that. And for sure, everyone's process is unique to their own. I think that's so important for the parents to understand as well. Is it doesn't matter, and as someone coming to watch one of your teammates, or a lot of schools coming to watch one of your teammates, only help you.
Exactly.
But I hear, I have conversations. Well, I don't know why all these players are coming to watch this player. My daughter gets more kills. Well, it has nothing to do with kills, but what you're also not seeing is, hey, they're watching the match, like you said, or someone watching your opponent is an opportunity for you to be seen as well. So yeah, everyone's process is their own, and it just, like you said, be proactive with it and have fun with the process. I think that's a big thing, Christina. Is it can't it should it is a stressful thing, but when you make the process fun, it just allows you to perform better. It allows the school will sense that as well. You're enjoying it. You're proactive. I think that's the big thing. Is it's a fun time. You only get to go through that process once in your life,
Right.
and you want to be able to have fun with it.
Yeah, no, you brought up an interesting point earlier. I just want to mention about Paula having very specific players she's looking at. I think that's really important to know too. Like, I've talked to college coaches that they want the 6'4" middle that just puts up a good block. Other college coaches, guess what? They want the undersized middle that's fast twitch, that moves laterally really fast, and just creates that energy. Undersized players are really well, undersized athletic players are really well recruited, I think, later though, right? In a lot of different schools. So I think understanding and knowing what type of an outside, what type of a middle the college coach is looking at, and maybe just accepting too that I'm just not, no matter what I do, I'm just not really the style of player that you're looking for, and that's
Yeah,
okay. There's someone else out there that wants your style, and that's
yeah.
where you help.
Control that. As a player, you can't control what someone is looking for. But you can control if you're the best version of what you are. And my advice to every player is, if you can serve, receive, pass, there isn't a college coach out in the country that doesn't like players that can pass the ball. So, that's always my thing, is whether, I don't care what position you are, if you're a middle, if you're whatever, if you can receive the ball,
Mm.
you're going to have a place to play in college if you can receive the ball at a high rate. So yeah, that's something that I always tell all the kids.
No, this has been awesome. And I think just a few thoughts for maybe part two, because we've
Yeah,
got almost an hour, is, I think we should talk more next time about, how to handle yourself on a visit, good questions to ask on a visit, how to act on a visit, all those types, centered around the visit. And then just maybe get into some more detail on good videos, good emails. And then other questions that people have, just, text you or I think is, it's an intricate process, but like
yeah,
you said, let's keep it fun and just trust in it, right?
yeah. You got to trust it, and I think that's the hard part. And like you said, at one point that you made was great. You mentioned like the top 5%, and remember, like the if you the majority of when you think if you're running out of time, you're not running out of time.
Right.
And I think the too late. Am I too late, or is am I too late? No,
Yeah.
there's players that don't even start the process till their senior year and end up having a great process with it. But it is a huge advantage to be aware of the process and start it, and like you said, get ahead of the game and
Yeah.
just be aware of what's out there. Even for our families of seventh and eighth graders, of just you know being able to know what a school is or what an environment looks like. But it's never too late,
Yeah.
you know. But it is important to be diligent with the stuff that you're doing. So yeah, that'd be great. I'm looking forward to part two.
Yeah, I think a really good place to start is to have a conversation with you and I, and just maybe like what level do you see me playing at? I think it's a great place to start, and then cast that wide net, right? Get by all means, if you're dying to go to UCLA, and both Aaron and I are saying you're probably not going to get to play volleyball there, or in whatever way we word it, still send that occasional email to UCLA. You never know, right? So it's important to have the big dreams. It's important to have realistic dreams, and it's important to have backup dreams, because guess what? You may be a D1 player, but at the end, decide my personality is more of a D2 player. I want to be well rounded. I want to be able to have my social life. I want to be able to go on mountain bike rides and not have my coach say I'm not allowed to, right? Or maybe you decide I want to become a nurse, and the only schools are going to let me to is a small NAIA that specializes in, or some form of nursing that will allow it. So anyway, the more conversations and discussions you have, the better. So thank you all so much for listening, and please let Aaron and I know what other questions that you'd like to have answered for part two.
Sounds good. Thanks, Christina. We'll
Thanks
see
so
ya.